In this video, we're going to be going over the best perks inside Warzone and making sure you're picking the best perks for certain situations. We're going to go through Perk 1, Perk 2 and Perk 3, letting you know which ones are the best. If you enjoy weapon stat breakdowns, weapon comparisons and overall just tips and tricks for Warzone, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we're trying to reach our goal of 10,000 subscribers, and click that link in the description and subscribe to our second channel. We do post extra content over there. So we're going to go through each perk category, so Perk 1, Perk 2 and Perk 3, talking about which are the best perks for each individual category. A lot of people do get this really confused, but the specialist perks that are available here, these green ones, do not work inside Warzone. So don't be using these thinking that you're going to get extra perks inside Warzone. It does not work at all. But when it comes to the perk system for Warzone now, the first perk that you probably have used is double time. And this doubles the duration of your tactical sprint time, and it also increases your crouch movement speed by 30%. Now, unless you're crouching around the map, which is not a lot of people, it's not really going to be completely viable. And doubling your tac sprint time is useful, but if you know how to slide cancel, you can do that anyway without even having to use this perk whatsoever. So double time is not one I would recommend. Even though it is a pretty viable perk, it's not one I would choose to use. EOD is probably the most popular, and for good reason, because it makes you take less damage from explosive fire. So if you're going to get hit with a Semtex, or if you're going to get hit with a C4 or a grenade, you're going to take significantly less damage with EOD than you would if you didn't have EOD equipped. Now, if you do take direct impact, so if you get stuck with a Semtex, if you get stuck with a thermite, you will die regardless. But if you do have this and someone throws a Semtex at your feet, for example, you will still take less damage, and it allows you to potentially win that gunfight still. Now, cold-blooded is a perk that people get really confused with. So there's cold-blooded and there's ghost. There's two different perks. It's not the same thing. So first of all, cold-blooded only helps to keep you off the thermal optics. It keeps you off thermal optics, and it doesn't trigger high alert. Those are the two main things that cold-blooded does inside Warzone. And people don't really use thermal optics all that much anymore. That was mainly like a season 1, season 2 type thing, like way back when Warzone first released. So when it comes to cold-blooded, is not that viable a perk. Then we have kill chain, and this is one of the perks where I feel like it's completely redundant, and they could actually just take this out of the game entirely and it wouldn't really make a difference whatsoever. It increases the chances of you finding kill streaks in supply boxes, and you do find kill streaks quite a lot inside Warzone if you're just opening supply boxes. I don't really think this is going to be super important. Maybe you might find an extra UAV or something that you might need. And considering you could buy a lot of your kill streaks from the stores inside Warzone, I don't really think this perk is all that viable at all, to be completely honest. Quick Fix is a perk that I did really want to like, and it does have a lot of really good benefits to using this perk. So the first one is if you're capturing an objective, so let's say you're doing a recon, is actually going to regenerate your health much quicker if you're taking damage, which is actually very useful, especially if you're doing recons quite a lot. This could help a ton inside Warzone. But another one is that if you kill an enemy player, it actually immediately starts your health regen, which is really important, especially if you're a very aggressive player. This could be very useful to taking out the next enemy, then the next enemy without having to play it up, which I do think is very important. I do think Quick Fix is a little bit underrated inside this game, but if we're looking at the best 3 perks in the Perk 1 slot, we're looking at Double Time, EOD, and Quick Fix in my opinion, and these are probably the most popular ones as well. Now, moving on to the Perk 2 slot, and in my opinion, I think this is probably the most important slot for people to actually get right, because there's some really good perks in here, and I feel like this is probably one of the ones where it's a bit more balanced overall. But when it comes to the Perk 2 slot, the first perk that shows up is Restocked. Now, what Restock does is it recharges your equipment, so that would be your lethals as well as your tacticals, and it takes 50 seconds to recharge that, which means you don't actually need to loot bodies and find more Semtexes or stuns. You just regenerate them automatically over time. I think this perk is very useful for aggressive players. Instead of choosing something like Ghost, you can't choose Restock, so you always have those lethal and tactical equipments to push buildings, which I think is really important because there's a lot of campers, especially recently inside Warzone. So I do think Restocked is a really good option for Perk 2. Hardline is a weird one because it reduces the cost of field upgrades as well as kill streaks inside the stores of Warzone, but I don't really think is going to be all that important unless you're not really looting up that much. If you're completing objectives, if you're looting up, if you're killing enemies, you're going to get a lot of cash in general. I think this perk is very situational when it comes to dying in the game, coming back end game from your gulag, for example, and you're trying to get your teammates back, trying to get some kill streaks and field upgrades, and buy some armor plates and not spend too much of your cash on that. So maybe that's what this would be useful for. But like I said, if you're looting up and playing the game and doing objectives, you won't really need to use this perk all that much. Moving on into Overkill now. Overkill is a pretty self-explanatory perk. You can carry 2 primary weapons, and everyone knows that primary weapons inside Warzone are the best weapons you can get. So you can carry like a sniper and an AR, an SMG and an AR, or whatever you want. You can carry 2 primary weapons, which I do think is pretty cool. And everyone knows that Overkill is one of the best perks in the game. Then we've got High Alert. Now this shows you if enemies are looking at you. So if an enemy is within a certain distance and looking in your direction, you will see yellow bars on the side of your screens to indicate where the enemy is. But like I said, High Alert is actually not a bad perk either. It's actually pretty useful depending on the kind of player you are. And sometimes it's even hard to spot players inside Warzone because of the visibility issue. So this perk could be overall very useful for someone who finds it quite hard to see enemy players. Moving on into Ghost now, which is definitely the #1 best perk in the entire game. And the only reason that no one just uses this straight away is because you do need Overkill on your first loadout. But I do think people get this mixed up with Cold-Blooded. So Ghost is the one that actually keeps you off UAVs. It also keeps you off heartbeat sensors as well. So I do think that this is probably the most powerful perk in the entire game, because in a battle royale, knowing enemy locations is quite important to doing well, and staying off that minimap, it's so important inside Warzone. So like I said, Ghost is probably the most OP perk in the entire game. Pointman is another perk where I do feel is a bit redundant as well. You do get more cash from completing objectives. Now, I feel like this is only viable in end game when there's maybe only like a scav or a bounty or something nearby. You need to get your teammates back. You need that extra cash. Maybe you're doing a recon or something. Maybe that's when this perk is most viable. But I think when you're in end game, you don't really want to be doing a recon objective or taking a most wanted contract or anything like that, especially if you're more of a passive kind of player. So going over the best 3 perks now for perk 2, Ghost is the #1 best perk for this perk category. It's pretty much the most overpowered in my opinion as well. Then we've got Overkill, so you can carry 2 primary weapons. And then Restocked is also a great option as well. So these 3 options are definitely the best. So Ghost, Overkill, and Restock. Moving on into the perk 3 slot, we've got Tune Up first. So Tune Up reduces the revive time by 25%. So if you're reviving any teammates, it will revive a lot quicker than if you didn't use this perk. So this is pretty cool inside Warzone, especially if your teammates are constantly going down. You do want to revive them as quickly as possible. This is a good option. I just don't feel like it's fast enough in my opinion, but we'll talk about that later on. Then we have Amped, which allows you to swap weapons way quicker, and it also gives you faster rocket launcher reloads. Now the rocket launcher reload part is just an extra bonus I think, but the main thing people use this for is to swap weapons quicker, especially if you're in a close range gunfight and you need to switch weapons as fast as possible. Let's say you ran out of ammo, you don't want to reload. Using Amped is way quicker than reloading your weapon, of course, so that is why a lot of people use Amped, and this is like the most used perk in the perk 3 slot. Then we've got Shrapnel, which spawns you with an extra piece of lethal equipment, and explosive damage delays enemy health regeneration. Now this is one of the ones where I do feel like it's quite redundant again inside Warzone, because spawning in with extra lethal equipment is not really going to give you any benefits really, because you could just pick up Semtexes and stun grenades off of enemy players that you've killed or lying around for loot on the ground. This is probably more along the lines for multiplayer. And then explosive damage delaying the enemy health regen doesn't really help all that much, especially inside Warzone where most of your gunfights are quite long ranges and people do have a lot of time to regenerate their health. Then you've got Battle Hardened, which reduces the strength of flashes, stuns, EMPs, and then you're immune to snapshot grenades as well. So this can be quite useful if you do feel like you're getting stunned quite a lot inside Warzone. I don't feel like it is as powerful as EOD in the perk 1 slot, because you do still get stunned for quite a reasonable amount of time with Battle Hardened, so it's not as viable as EOD in my opinion. But if you do want any extra advantage from stuns and flashes, then battle hardened is your best option. When it comes to spotter, spotter is actually pretty cool. You can see enemies' lethal equipment through doors and walls, which is basically like claymores, proximity mines, that kind of stuff. Mainly for players who are camping in buildings, this is pretty cool. And on top of that, you can hack it as well, so you can use their proximity mines against them. So this works out to be a really cool perk. I'm surprised not a lot of people actually use this already. And then lastly, tracker is something I do think is pretty viable in Warzone as well. And it allows you to see a footprint trail of where enemy players have been, even if they have ghosts. So this is the only way to detect a ghost player nearby is with tracker, which I do think is pretty cool. And I think I should maybe start using this a bit more often to see where enemy players have been, because I feel like it's so hard to spot enemy players in this game at the current moment until they fix the lighting issue, that is. So in the perk 3 slot, the best perks are amped, tracker, and battle hardened. So there we have it. There are the best perks for Warzone. Let me know what perks you're using down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video and learned something new, don't forget to subscribe to the channel as we try to reach our goal of 10,000 subscribers. And click that link in the description down below and subscribe to our second channel. We do post extra content over there as well. And thank you very much for watching.